It's for everyone who are either seeking career, who wants to become a architect, who want to be a consultant, and even the companies who wanted to understand what those solutions are and how the solution can help them. So that's being said, I have another Microsoft MVP, Yannic Grabber, and glad to have him on the call. And I think Yannic is from Sweden, right, Yannick? Correct me if I'm
Almost.
wrong.
I'm from Switzerland. Yes, that's
Switzerland,
very
right?
common.
Yeah. So Yannick is the Microsoft Azure MVP, and I'll have Yannick give him a little introduction about himself, and then we go from there. Over to you, Yannick.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Yannic Grabber, as you just said. So first of all, Adnan, thank you very much for having me in this podcast. Podcast. Yeah, I'm Azure MVP and Security MVP since 2021 Azure, and this year I got honored with the second award with the Security Award as well. I work and live in Switzerland. I co-founded Joker IT, where I work as a Azure solution architect and a consultant, and of course a member of board. So I also run the companies together with my co-founders. Yeah.
Ah, nice. Even this is good. So we'll explore about that entrepreneurship also. But again, congratulations, man. Being an MVP and retaining it, that takes a lot of effort. And yeah, and Joker ID is funny, but again, we wanted to know a little bit background if you would like to share and a little bit about your career journey for the people who are listening to us.
Yeah, sure. Of course. So I started my IT career about 15 years ago as an intern in IT engineering. After that, I had several roles in different companies. So I came around a bit, sometimes more technical related, sometimes more leaning towards business. Yeah. So thanks to this, as well as my graduation in business IT later on, I've been able to fulfill many different things and roles within companies, including consulting, business development, team leading as well. What I really like, educating professionals beside my obvious technical tasks as a IT engineer. So then a few years ago of today, that's what I was speaking about before, I co-founded Joker IT, where I work ever since as a solution expert and member of board. Yeah. So that's the story behind
Yeah.
my journey. Yeah.
Right. So one of the questions I get a lot of time is, do you need a degree in IT to start a career in IT? Do you, in your region, do you have the requirement for having a 4 years degree?
I don't think so. I think, especially in the situation now, it's probably the easiest time ever to get to get a job in IT. But you need education and not a specific degree, I would say, but you need to have a lot of motivation to educate yourself on everyday basis, right? So you really need to do your own research, willing to learn every day and get hands on and yeah, just know your stuff, because it's not IT is not that much of an 8 to 5 job. It's transforming a lot nowadays anyway. So I would say no, you don't need specifically a degree, but of course it helps.
Right. Yeah, because of the demand versus supply, there's a huge demand. So you don't want to wait 4 years. Just learn the skills and get in the market based on the
Yeah.
skill what you learn, right? One of the most commonly question asked on social media or even on internet, a day in the life of, it can be a cloud engineer, cloud security engineer, architect, or basically this type of role, whether you're customer facing sales. So can you share a little bit about on that? What does a typical day look like for you, or a week or something along those lines?
Typical day is pretty hard to explain, because I think there is nothing like a typical day in my job, because I have a very exciting job, as not a single day is like the other. Mainly, I work as an Azure solution expert and consultant. So I consult customers on their path in the cloud to leverage their potential, right? So their potential of their business with the Microsoft cloud. So all those customers of all size, from a few employees up to international enterprises, they have very different stakeholders and therefore very different needs as well. So diverse regulatories from various industries, which is part of that as well. So technical as well as on the business side, which makes my job very interesting, right? So they're the stakeholders with very different needs in the whole spectrum. As well as an MCT, I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. As I mentioned at the beginning, I really like to educate professionals as well to, for example, also people without a degree, so they can get into the cloud and get into IT. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, so I also provide Microsoft trainings about Azure now and then to educate those professionals or future professionals also. Beside all that, I co-run and develop my company, of course, which I founded. So therefore, I have a very diverse role, I would say, or several roles. So this is hard to explain. Like, how does a typical day look like? As there is not no such thing. Yeah.
No, fair enough. Because end of the day, basically your role is helping the business, helping the customer. And if it gets too technical, being an expert, you can have those technical conversation as well. So again, it comes with the experience. It's a step by step thing. When you grow in your career, you get to the point. There's no such thing overnight or shortcuts. But as long as you have clear vision, you get to the point where you enjoy your job. So that's very important.
Yeah, I think that's a major point you said, actually, enjoying your job. That's also regarding the question you said about, do you need a degree? No, you need motivation. You need to like what you do, right? That's for me the most important thing.
So yeah, I mean, now I think we can get to the next point where your specialty, your area, where how do you help those businesses with what type of solutions?
Let's get started very easy. So Defender for Cloud is a service which helps you to protect your cloud services, your cloud environment at the end of the day, right? That's basically the very high level job of Defender for Cloud. So it's a comprehensive solution that integrates with Azure, but as well with other cloud platforms to provide visibility, threat detection, and response capabilities. It's a very handy solution since it combines several capabilities. For example, like the workload protection, it combines things such as the various Defender you can leverage in the cloud, for example, Defender for server, for database, storage, and so on, containers, and keep going, right? So that's a great thing. And it also does this all natively in the cloud and without any agent installed on a DB, for example, on Azure. It also helps you to prevent breaches, which is a big part, as it analyzes your Azure environment and it provides best practice recommendations. It proposes, therefore, based on those best practice recommendations, it proposes helpful remediation actions as well. So it also tells you which best practice and recommendations you're not following, right? And help you to remediate, or actually tell you how to remediate, what you could do to remediate actually this potential lack for a breach, right? So it's therefore a great solution to manage security across all your cloud environments or many cloud environments, and reducing the risk of data breaches and compliance violations. With Defender for Cloud, you can also monitor your cloud assets, identify your vulnerabilities, right? Just as I said, and especially misconfigurations, which happens to be for my smaller companies happen many times, right? They want to get rid of on-premise, for example, the small clients, and just move everything to the cloud as fast as possible. They just get started, and then a misconfiguration for sure will take place because there was no proper thoughts about it beforehand.
So is this something you want to share with us? What type of misconfiguration do you see?
Oh, there are various types of it, right? Often it's network related. So, for example, network related, you just have next finish virtual machines or services configured as they are. So more kind of I would say test deployment and fully exposed to the internet, right? And then you have serious issues then, right? If you open an SSH or RDP port to the internet for a few minutes, and then you're in trouble.
Right. So you make a good point, right? So people have just been doing migration to the cloud and they come to the movement, machines are vulnerable, and that gives the visibility, right? And so like, what are other situations? What are the different capabilities of Defender for Cloud, basically?
Mhm.
We talked
So
about vulnerability scanning. We talk about different protection, monitoring. So is this something you think, hey, we see a lot of improvement on a lot of area where a customer needs to pay attention, or these capabilities are more helpful along those lines?
I think it pretty much also depends on the size of the company we're talking about, right? And
Okay.
how familiar they are already with IT stuff, let's put it that way. So like small companies with like 10, 20 employees or maybe 50, they're most likely not aware of how dangerous it is out there, right? In IT and what that could mean business wise as well, right? So I think for them it's a very easy step to activate Defender for Cloud and a very cost effective, in my point of view, to protect their environment and also just show them that there are several configurations we can work on, right? So that's a very important part. Then for enterprises, they most likely have already security engineers and made some thoughts about their security and have tools and so on. So then it really depends: is Defender for Cloud the right solution for them or not? So in my point of view, Defender is a great, or better to say, the solution once a company decided to go cloud or hybrid cloud with Microsoft, right? That's when it's leveraging its full potential, and that's when I think also enterprises start to maybe replace other products or just in addition also other products, right? Yeah. Because
Yeah.
once you move to the cloud, in such a case, you want to have a centralized security posture management, and not just a centralized security posture management like they had maybe before. You need one which understands the challenges and the differences and best practices of the cloud, right? It's a so-called new world, and therefore, yeah, I really like to use Defender for that.
So we talked about, you mentioned about small businesses, and you also talk about large enterprise where they do a hybrid. So let's take an example for small businesses. What's your recommendation from the day first they need to turn this on, and what type of licensing do they require? And is it only going to protect the Azure workload, or is it also going to protect services running in Microsoft 365?
So the Defender for Cloud itself is also including parts of M365, like for example, the Azure Active Directory, which is basically the tenant. So it's M365 as well as Azure, right? But it's Defender for Cloud is more focused on the not end user facing part. So it's about VMs, databases, and so on, right? The Defender for Cloud part. But there are many different defenders around, right? Defender for Cloud
Okay.
is one. Then there's Defender for Server, which I already said is kind of part of Defender for Cloud. So it communicates with the Defender for Cloud, or actually is also manageable by Defender for Cloud. And then there's Defender for Endpoint, for example, for your customer-facing devices, right? Your notebook, where your end users are working at, right? So then this is also Defender, but it's another product basically. Right.
So for a small, medium-sized company, it's a no-brainer. They just go all in all with Defender versus the enterprise. They may have any other enterprise solution. And
Yeah, I think you have to look at what type of systems you want to protect, right? And therefore, then you leverage the several products. You can go, as an example, Defender for Endpoint managed by a security center, and Intune to manage your endpoint devices, because you want to use the Defender for Endpoint on your endpoint devices, but not leveraging Defender for Cloud. That's an option. Or vice versa.
okay,
You can also leverage Defender for Cloud if you're going to Azure, using Defender for Cloud to protect your Azure environment and your system, your assets, also on premise. You can integrate them into Defender for Cloud, but then still not using Defender for Endpoint, because you already
right.
have another license for your endpoints or whatever, right? So you don't have to switch everything at the same time, or not even everything whenever.
Okay.
So you can really leverage whatever you need and whatever you think is best for your business. But
Yeah.
back to your question about the Defender for Cloud for small business. I really think it is a no-brainer, just as you said. Once you go to Azure, make sure Defender for Cloud is activated on every subscription you have on Azure, because there are two SKUs of a Defender for Cloud. There's the free one, which already gives you a lot of recommendation and do already some scans. And this is for free. So that's for me a no-brainer. Go ahead and use it.
Yeah, you can test the product before you buy the license. So again, that's good to know. Let's talk about something you were mentioning about, which first time I heard only from you, is the ARC. So first tell us what Microsoft Azure ARC is, and then we get into more detailed conversation to understand it better.
Sure, yeah. Azure ARC is I really like it. It's a pretty cool service. It lets you manage basically your hybrid cloud resources from a single place. That single place will be the Azure portal. So you can use Azure ARC to deploy and configure, and also to monitor your applications and infrastructure across different environments, such as on-premises, as I just said before. We're getting back to the Defender for Cloud, because this also makes it possible to manage your on-premise environment, your on-premise systems, your servers, in Defender for Cloud, and protect them with Defender for Cloud, and also get recommendations, right? So you bring them into the cloud, into a single management. So that's one thing. So what it really is if you're familiar with the Azure Resource Manager, if you are in the Azure industry, yeah, then you know the Azure Resource Manager. That's the very central part, which, as the name says, manages all the resources. So every JSON template you have is basically an Azure Resource Manager template.
Yeah, known as ARM template, basically.
Exactly, right? The Azure Resource Manager ARM. So Azure ARC really is just the extension of Azure Resource Manager. So you can also use those capabilities on premise, or any edge location, or also different cloud.
So what are the business cases, right? So is it only specific to Azure and hybrid, or can we manage some other thing as well, like different clouds?
Yeah, there are different clouds you can manage. Basically, it doesn't, talking about Azure Arc for servers, as example, it doesn't really matter where that server is running, as long as there is a connection, of course.
Okay.
And internet connection is already enough. There is no need for a VPN or a private network connectivity. Port 443, that's basically enough. And it doesn't really matter where the VM is running. So it could be any cloud, any edge location, or on premise. So yeah.
Wow. Just it's like, I see where it's coming from. It feels like it's like a cloud security posture management, basically. Within Azure, you can manage AWS, we can manage GCP, so you don't have to move away from Azure. The idea is that bring everything to Azure, one dashboard, you have visibility in all the cloud environment used by a particular enterprise or a customer.
Yeah. So what Defender for Cloud does for your security posture, right? Azure Arc is doing for your management posture, basically, right? If you want to put it that way, you bring the management part of your systems into the cloud. So that's one way, right? The RM, the Azure Resource Manager extension with Azure Arc, you can onboard your machines, your servers, to the Azure portal, and therefore use cloud capabilities, Azure capabilities, like you do on Azure VMs. Yeah, that's, for example, the monitoring integration. That's a very straightforward example. But also the update management with Update Management Center, you can leverage those things then as well, right? The anti-malware, also change tracking and inventory is a very, very good case, which you can leverage then, right? On premise, but managed all in a single pane of glass in your Azure portal. So therefore, it doesn't really matter anymore where your machine is running. If it's Azure, if it's another cloud, if it's on-premise, you manage it all in your Azure portal. And the great thing, on the other hand, as well, is now I was talking about how your on-premise environment is getting into Azure. Where it's going with Azure Arc is the other way around as well. So it brings cloud native applications and services to your data center on your hardware you're running in your data center or edge location or wherever. That's where it's get very exciting.
So yeah, so this is something I'd like to understand more. So you bring your cloud stuff in data center. So where do you, this Azure ARC, I believe it's a service. It's in the cloud. So it's a management portal where it gives the visibility to on-prem and in the cloud. Is there a particular example you can, or something
Yeah,
you want
sure.
to explain more?
Like there's a very straightforward example, which is now in preview, is Azure ARC Resource Bridge. Azure ARC Resource Bridge is basically also for service what we said. Now we bring on-premise services, on-premise servers to the cloud to manage. We now can, with Azure Arc Resource Bridge enabled and deployed, we can deploy from the Azure portal VMs to my data center or to my custom location, wherever I defined that. The Azure portal, I like to have a new VM in this custom location, which might be my data center, and it should have these specs, right? And then it will deploy it on my hardware I was providing and onboarded. So this is all based on a fully managed Kubernetes extension you're gonna install on your vCenter server or Azure Stack HCI, and then you can run and deploy your VMs out of the cloud but on premise. So that's the management part. Also, there are Azure Arc data services, which is another thing then that's based on Kubernetes clusters then as well on premise. So you have to onboard your Kubernetes cluster and then you're try to go not too deep here. And then you can basically deploy an SQL DB as a service, as you know it from Azure, just the DB as a service on premise on your own hardware without a proper server underneath with an OS you have to manage and so on.
I see a solid business case for the large enterprise, so they want to have more control. They have to put some sensitive data. So basically they will have more control to have their database as a service or VM or Kubernetes cluster if they wanted to deploy in their data center, where they will have more control. And at the same time, they have more of enterprise level governance around that. So yeah, this is pretty interesting. So this is in a preview, right? So have you started using that?
The resource bridge, unfortunately, so far I didn't have the chance to have hands-on because it needs a lot of infrastructure on premise with the vCenter or Azure Stack HCI so far.
Yeah.
But I'm very eager to get my hands on.
Oh,
But Azure
that's
ARC in
solid.
general, yes, I implemented that already several times, and it's a very cool service. Already I really like already the part that I have the single pane of glass for my management in the cloud. So it doesn't really matter anymore where my VMs are running, right? So Defender Arc for server or Arc enabled servers, Arc enabled servers, when I bring them to Azure to manage. So it doesn't matter where they run. I manage them in Azure, and I can leverage also cloud services around that, right? Like I said, the update management and also compliance. You can use Azure policies to check your compliance, and that's also a very big thing.
Yeah, compliance is a big one. As I mentioned, like especially not only in US but in Europe, you have a lot of requirements. Like every country, even they're small, but they have a lot of requirements, Germany versus Switzerland. So again, data residency is one of them, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to address all of those issues. And with the compliance feature, which is another whole different topic, you can pull the report and see how does your infrastructure looks like. In my opinion, is more of, if you have to look at it, it's a more of an infrastructure level service, which will, once you have an infrastructure level, basically you're covering everything in the cloud. You give the maximum visibility and maximum control. So yeah, I mean, I'm like, excited now. That's because that's the challenge. You have so many customers, the last customer, they have multiple environments, and that's always the discussion. Hey, how do we want to manage, right? There are so much stuff. So it's become really complicated for not the security, but also the IT operations, to not only to have the visibility, but ongoing maintenance and management. So again, wrap up, is there anything you wanted to add? Any advice?
Yeah, of course. My advice is just get your hands on. So both services, if you never heard about one of them, go do your research. It doesn't need much of research. Just get your hands on, learn how to deal with those services and how to leverage those. I think both of them are very well worth to know and to yeah, educate yourself. And as I said, most important thing in IT is educate yourself and yeah, on daily basis.
Yeah, and if is there anything you want to share? Like, do you write blog or something you wanted to share? I can put in my description if you have any, but you can give it to me offline so people can reach out and read and learn more about you.
Yeah, sure.
But again, yeah. Okay. So that's perfect. And I really appreciate it, Yannick. And thank you so much for taking out time today to getting on this podcast. And hopefully we'll see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed that.